Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Space for Life. We're swimming in an absolute riptide of distraction, and it's not going to get any calmer. And in the midst of that, we're experiencing in our culture an epidemic of loneliness that we can practically feel. And so it's in light of that today's episode of Space for Life is going to be about the power and the practice of presence. And I have as my special guest, Dr. Nelson Ould, longtime friend. We probably go back 40-ish years or so. Nelson, I got to know him when he was an associate pastor at Third Church here in Richmond, and he is also the founding pastor of Community West Church, and now freshly retired pastor. So I'm so excited to be able to be one of the first people to share in an activity post-retirement. And Nelson, wanted to bring into this conversation because more than literally anybody that I can think of, that I know regularly and deeply practices the power of presence in just how you enter into whatever space you're in. And I've experienced it across, many different places, pastoral and just as a friend. And so I wanted to bring him in because this is a special gift that I think you have, Nelson, that I want to know where this came from, how you've grown it, and how you can help us grow in the power and the practice of presence. So welcome, Nelson, to Space for Life. This is a gift. Our friendship has been a gift, and I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you, Tommy. Same for me. And I feel like in some ways that I backed in to a deeper understanding of the power of presence. And the context was visitation ministry.
Okay.
And I would find that people would remember years and even decades later that I had been with them in the context of hospitalization or maybe grief and loss. And rarely would anyone ever remember anything I said or anything I did, but they would always remember that I was there. And I started to reflect on that and just even my sense of identity as a visitor and my sense of identity as a Christian. And I think it has been sort of a gift and a blessing whenever I have come back to the identity of presence. And so again, I think mainly the context of maybe visitation in the beginning. And I have even been on the receiving side of that. One of the things, Tommy, you and I share is some significant losses, you with your daughter and me with my first wife, Lacey. And I can remember when Lacey had her first significant surgery, she contracted cancer in her late 20s. And back in 2001, she was about to have a surgery down at MCV, and it was early morning, and we were on the brink of what was a terrifying, hopeful surgery to remove cancer. And if everything went well, it would be 15 hours. And I'll never forget that at 6 a.m. when we were down at the hospital, in walked the pastor from our church. His first name was Steve. And again, I don't remember anything Steve said or did during that visit. I'm sure he prayed. I'm sure he offered scripture. But what I mainly remember was that he was there. And so that began to form me a bit. And it even began to help me think about some of the almost archetypes. When I was a kid and I was afraid in the night, I can remember sometimes my mom coming into the room and just sitting in the chair in my room. And the sense of it was the power was in her being present. And then we adopted our daughter Galena, and Galena has had a lot of trauma. And one of her phrases to us during her teenage years was, "Are you there? Are you there?" I think she was longing to know almost at a primal level, is anybody there? Because she had been abandoned at a young age. So these are just some of the currents for me that help me understand. I think that sometimes maybe we focus a little bit too much on what we do or say in our relationships and even in what we do in an ordinary day. And maybe we underweight the significance and the power of our mere presence with another person.
I think that is just absolutely so true. And in many ways, that is an incredible freedom, because so many people think when they walk into a difficult situation, the anxiety is, what am I going to say? And realizing that that is so much secondary to just choosing to be there with the person is incredibly freeing, actually. And I agree. I remember, over the difficult years, who was there, and when people came. And rarely, to your point, do I remember what they said during that, unless they said something, very inappropriate or off base. Then you might remember it. But there were very few of those over all the years with all the people. Very rarely did anybody say anything that stuck with us in a negative sense. They were there and they said certain things, and we received it as a gift during all of that.
Well, I appreciate you the way you put that. And one of my passions, honestly, is helping to equip the church to be with the people they know in times of need. And a lot of times I think people shy away. You might say ordinary Christians, rank and file Christians, they shy away because they say, I don't know what to do if somebody's had a significant loss like you've had, for example. And I think it's wonderful to free people from feeling that they have to be spectacular in what they do or say.
Right.
But in fact, just go and be present and be quiet and know that that is the greatest gift of all. And I think it frees people too. I think the pressure is on having to make a statement that is so important to the person you're visiting. But I think focusing on the power of presence helps us maybe just go with the simple questions. How are you?
Yeah.
What's this been like for you? Has faith been a resource to you? Where has God been in all of this? There's even a humility to it that I like, but there's a freedom to it. And I'll say maybe one more thing. I think maybe as I've looked at Scripture, have felt that maybe we've underrepresented the theological foundations. And when I look at Scripture from start to finish, it seems like God went to great lengths simply to be present with his people. As I look at him sharing the same space with Adam and Eve in the garden, and then at the end, it says in the new creation in Revelation 21, God has now made his dwelling with man, and he is with his people. And in between, you have things like the pillar of fire by day in the Old Testament, and the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day. And it was simply God's presence going before his people. And then when Jesus came, of course, one of his names is Emmanuel, God with us. But I think sometimes we even want to rush past that because it's an unexpected part of the salvation story, mere presence, that God in heaven narrowed himself to come to earth. We want to rush past and say, yeah, but what did God do for me? The start of it and the theological ground of it is he came to be with us.
Yeah.
And those are powerful theological themes for me, as I think I can be freed from being spectacular in a friendship or in a situation where I'm with someone going through a hard time. Just start with, most of it is, what does it mean to be with another person?
Yeah, and I want to point out, because I've known you for a long time in a lot of different contexts, what you said earlier about that this idea of the power of presence has become an identity for you, because I've known pastors who, when they're in a pastoral setting, put on a pastoral tone, and they all of a sudden become present in that context in a way that is different than they would be in a just natural other type of context. And in knowing you, what I've sensed, which I think is so relevant to those who are listening to this, is that this power of presence, yes, it's something that you can offer to people in the difficult times, but it is also a way of being in the ordinary everydayness that we experience. Just having lunch or breakfast with a friend, coffee, or while walking on a golf course, or out to dinner with friends. And what I've noticed about you is that presence never changes by context. It isn't like, okay, well, now I'm in a pastoral setting. You may have learned and grown into it through that, but you've chosen to make this part of your identity in a very positive way, to just say, if I'm going to be with someone, I'm going to be present. I'm going to do those things that are being present, because that's where life is. That's where relationship is. That's where joy is. It doesn't matter why we're together. If we're together, it's worth being present. And that's a whole different take than I think so many of us have, where it's, oh, I'm going to turn on being present. And it's different.
It is different. And I think I appreciate the way you said that. And maybe I would agree that it has become foundational to me to being a Christian. And if I could say one more thing maybe about the setup for that, I mentioned God seemed to go to great lengths to be present with his people through the pillar of fire by night, the cloud by day, and then through his son. And then interestingly, he has come to live in us. And so we become the bearers of his presence to other people. And so the way I've come to think about even relationships, and particularly care in relationships, and I would say, Tommy, almost part of what you're putting your finger on is, every time I get together with someone, on some level, I think part of it is offering care or offering love.
Yes.
And I think being present to another person means yielding in service to the other person long enough to see what God is up to. So being present to another person is yielding myself in interest of loving the other person. And so the setup is that I don't know what it means to love the other person, but I am a bearer of Christ who is present in me. And to be present to another person means that there are the three of us. There's the two of us, and then there's the presence of Christ. So the way to care for and love another person in conversation or just in any setting is to maybe explore how another person is, what they've been up to, what they are longing for, what they've been experiencing, trusting that the Spirit will open up something if we are attentive enough to the moment. So I feel like I didn't say that as well as I would love to say it, but I'm agreeing with you that it has become foundational, I think, to be a Christ bearer in relationships with other people, whether you're in the coffee shop or on the golf course, or
they're all holy moments.
They're all holy. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and I also have appreciated that over the years and the conversations. While I think you bring a unique kind of gift of presence every time we've been together, that's not done in such a way that, well, you're making it all about me. It is, we have conversation, and part of that presence is your willingness to share and talk about things going on in your life as much as listening to things going on with me. There is a partnership of presence that, in order for it to be, authentic, needs to be.
There needs to be some mutuality, and it's also something very helpful that you're putting your finger on, because there can be a tendency when you want to be present to someone else not to be as self-disclosive.
Right.
But I've actually had to learn more about what it means to be mutually open.
Sure, which is all the more difficult as a pastor than, someone, in general circumstances. But I'm sure that is a challenge. In some ways, you can hide behind questions to someone else, and that
it's a good point,
I think
Tommy.
will show in some ways if that's all there is.
It's a really good point.
Yeah. The other thing that I think about it, and I do want to kind of get into this because, the power and the practice and the identity of presence is something that in you, from my perspective, has become natural second nature. But yet there are practices, there are elements, I guess you would say, to being present with someone that are, I think, somewhat good to name. One of those is that I think presence, in my mind, always has an acuteness of listening to it. It may not involve a lot of speaking, as we've talked about. The speaking kind of can be or not be in a present situation, but in order for there to really be present, someone has to be truly listening to what's being said, both in words and in body language, which I've always felt to be true with you. But that listening is, it's a real skill to develop.
Well, and when you say that, Tommy, and I appreciate that very much, when you say that, one of the things that comes to mind is listening for open doors. Like, you'll be in a conversation with someone and someone will say, like, I went to the beach, and we were talking about this just a few moments ago. I went to the beach. How was it? And you might say it was fine, or you might say it was fine, but we had one difficult moment, or things didn't go exactly as we had hoped. And in fact, Weezy got sick.
Yeah.
And so if you say to me, yes, it was a good trip, but there were some things that didn't go exactly as we were hoping, I have a choice at that point. Now, I've heard that maybe.
Right.
But if I heard that enough to say, oh, tell me more about that. Now, you can choose how much to say at that point in terms of how much vulnerability. But I have heard that there's an open door that indicated to me that there's more to the story. And so I would just say I am often just listening for open doors. People will cue us that there's more to the story. And we have choices at that point. I would say to be present to you in that moment. If you do say to me, yes, but everything didn't go as we were hoping, I could rush right by that and say, oh, I went to the beach also. And the conversation becomes a ping pong match.
Exactly.
I pull it back to me.
Yeah.
But being present to you would be, I have the choice to say, okay, I see an open door and something Tommy has shared. And I can choose to stay with his story and be present to him by asking a question for him to tell me more if he chooses. So with listening, I think listening is also love. I think a lot of this is, do I love a person in a conversation enough to stay with what they're saying?
Yes.
Because
yeah.
It's so foundational to us to want to yank it back to what it makes us think about in our own lives, or
That's right.
something that applies to us. But
yeah,
that's
you wouldn't
just,
believe how bad my vacation was.
Right.
You think yours was bad.
That's right. So it's just self-centeredness.
Yeah.
So there's
yeah.
I think being present, honestly, when we see this in Jesus, is always sacrifice. You may sacrifice maybe what you want to say that relates to your life so that you can stay with the person's story that's the person right in front of you. So that...
Yeah. So I want to throw in my own kind of bias on what I see in myself and I see in people around me, often sabotages presence. And there are two things that I've got this sense that we've got to begin to address these things. And one is distraction.
Yeah.
And the second one is hurry.
Yes.
That the minute that I am in a time frame of mind, that is, I have so much time to go, I am now immediately, while I'm listening, I'm calculating in my mind how much time can I give to this thread of a conversation. My mind is in a slightly distracted mode. Then on top of that, in so many conversations, there are all sorts of distractions which are pinging around in our minds that we've lost the ability to manage. And it may be the activities of the day, it might be the next activities, it might be visually what's happening around us, but that distractedness dilutes our ability to listen to what the person is saying because we've got these other noises going on in our head. And I notice with you, particularly, and I don't know whether this has been something you've worked on or not, eye contact that is very, very specific to you in terms of a conversation and not allowing some of those things. But I guess at some level I'm going, I can, work as hard as I can to be present. I'm going to come and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to give that person all of that attention. But if I haven't dealt with that core distractedness, that's part of who I am or the way I live my life, and if I haven't dealt with, the rush in my life, I'm just fighting against an almost impossible current to actually be present with someone.
Well, and you're really the expert on this, Tommy, with how to build margin into your life.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to share any more thoughts you have on how to do that. I feel you probably know more than I do about
That's because I struggle with it more.
how to shape a life that has margin. And part of it is just valuing it enough to fight for it.
Yes.
I would, one of the places that I notice it the most, when I really have to fight for it, is when my wife Lisa and I will see each other at the end of the day. Now, currently, because I've entered retirement, it is she who is coming home at the end of the day.
Right.
And, but it has always been a challenge for me. What she would love, because she'll be bumping around the kitchen, what she would love is for me to sit on the stool.
Yes.
And give her my undivided attention, just to hear for a few minutes what her day has been like. And I have a hard time with that. And it's also true that I usually need a little space before I'm ready to share what my day has been like. But I fight for it because in my mind, I know that some of it is just the value and going back to identity, that it's enough to be present to another person. That's enough as a Christian,
right,
in representing Christ in this situation, to be present. But I know that I'm loving her, and I am giving her the greatest gift I can if I will sit on the stool at the end of the day and just say, "How was your day?" and listen. So all I know is kind of fighting for it. I am as susceptible to distraction as you are. Maybe eye contact helps. Maybe I think of the phrase full-faced.
Yeah.
I like to be full-faced with people. It's also why in the flesh is helpful. Now, you can be present to people over text and things like that, but there is something to turning towards someone and giving them your full face. And maybe that's a way to be more present to them.
Yeah. And I think it's also helpful to name that for a variety of reasons, the closer we are to someone, in a sense, the harder it is to be present.
That's
because we get used to them. We actually take them for granted. So your experience with Lisa is, I think, almost everybody's experience with people that they are closer to. The guard gets let down. The vigilance is lowered when we're with someone that is used to us. And so we get, in some senses, lazy in a way that we wouldn't with almost a total stranger.
It's a great point.
Yeah. So as I think about this, and I love the way, you came into our pre-conversations about this with this real heart to talk about the power of presence, and my kind of side angle of it is about kind of the practice of presence. Both are important, but what I would love to offer to those who are listening is the challenge to try to find this power of presence and the practice of presence, and to particularly practice presence with the people closest to you. So how powerful would it be if we said, okay, I need to practice in this. I need to grow in this. This isn't my natural strength. So I'm going to practice this with my wife.
Yeah.
With my husband, or with my child, or with the coworker who sits next to me. And you take those places where it's hardest for you and say, this is going to be my practice experiment, and I'm going to do it. I think it'd be a great way of taking something that takes work, in a sense, and say, well, let's try it.
It's a great place to start. And it makes me think of, maybe if we're getting very practical, maybe just a few things that we could try to get into that with the people that are closest to us.
Yeah.
One of them for me is when somebody is sharing with you, a family member, a good friend, a coworker, ask them 3 follow-up questions before you make a statement. It's just one
Okay.
thing to think about. The questions would be things like, and this isn't a question, but tell me more about that, or will you tell me more about that, or what were you hoping for, or what were you longing for, or something along those lines. A second thing I would say,
And that might take a little practice.
that might take a little practice.
Because if you don't want to get so into it that you're not even listening to the person because you're thinking about the questions. So you might find if you start there that, the first time or two, you're only getting 1 or 2 questions into it.
Ask a question or 2 before
or
you make
3.
a statement.
Yeah.
Because normally our statements are door closers, but
Yes.
our questions invite more and something deeper and something more meaningful from the person. Another thing that I think helps us to be present is follow up. I think that part of what we're talking about being present, and you mentioned listening, if we have listened to a person, especially share something that's been hard or difficult or something that's coming up that they're dreading, it's wonderful a week later to just send a text or a call and ask how that went. I think that's rare today because what happens is people will have an interaction and then that interaction is gone because, to your point about distraction, they've moved on to the next thing.
Right.
Part of being present is to linger in the power of being present to the person enough that a week later, maybe we prayed for the person and we would just send them a text and say,
that's a great suggestion.
How did that go? I think that's part of being present.
Well, and think about what that communicates, because I do it rarely. I experience it rarely, but when I do experience someone who has reached out, followed up in whatever form, whether text or otherwise, I have this, this magnified sense of, wow, they really were present. They really were listening because it's lingered with them.
Yes.
Not in a check off the list way, but it's lingered with them to the point that they're checking in.
They've taken it to heart.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, it was something that was very much on your heart, and they've taken it to heart. And that's a form of being present to another person. It's sort of heart to heart.
Yes.
And following up, I think is just a wonderful skill to learn. And maybe you need to make some notes in your phone or something to keep up, and not in a mechanical way, but in a heartfelt way. But soon it becomes just the way your heart goes, because you've invested your heart in the first place when you had the conversation.
Well, exactly. And it's like with so many things that we grow in, whether it's, exercise or other things, what we're seeking for is to develop the habit of presence.
I like that.
It can get to be the point that I can see with you where it comes naturally. It's second nature. And that's exactly what a habit is.
Yes.
And so if we learn, because we practice for a while, asking 1, 2, or 3 questions, all of a sudden, a month down the road, we're finding that we start to ask those questions without even thinking about asking those questions, because that's become a habit of being present. And we've experienced the rewards of being present. And those rewards, that sense of connection, that sense of feeling, of intimacy, is the things we are so longing for in life. And they're the gifts that we receive when we offer someone else present.
It's a great point, Tommy. It's a great point. So it really does come full circle because
Yeah.
it really is what we long for is connection. And something you mentioned earlier that's worth coming back to, in 2023, this U.S. Surgeon General noted that loneliness and isolation, he actually called them a public health epidemic, leading to higher incidences of heart disease, anxiety, premature death. And of course, that was coming out of the COVID pandemic.
Right.
But I think underneath that is how much people long for connection. People are hungry for connection. And even with all the ways that we can communicate with each other, there is still just that longing for a real connection. And I think we're talking about even just some human skills.
Exactly.
And relational skills that will give us what we want in the first place.
Yeah. Well, it's such a good point. And, that 2023 study, we were coming out of COVID. We're out of COVID. And yet that epidemic is worse than ever, which was kind of as I thought about this podcast, why I thought about that word of the riptide of distraction and loneliness, because it is so significant. And we have so many, incredible tools and opportunities and such abundance in our world. And yet we're losing out so much because of this epidemic of loneliness and isolation that trumps all of this in such a huge way. So I think while we're having this conversation, this is not just a tool to use, that, okay, we're going to learn to be present. This is life. And I think it's at the core and the substance of living well.
Yeah.
And
really getting what we want most.
Yeah. It's at the core and the substance of love.
Yes.
And
I think that's right.
If we can't be present, how much are we loving?
Sure.
And so I think it's really important. And, I love that we're talking about some different practices. I think what's important for all of us to realize, particularly in our culture, is that presence no longer comes naturally to us.
That's a great point.
So therefore, we have to work at it. We have to build the skill, and we can build it as a skill and then, into an identity, and then, enjoy the rewards of it. But we're probably going to have to work at it, because everything is fighting against it. The rush, the distraction of our world, the tools, all of these things are fighting against it. And so my hope is that your words about the power of presence will carry enough weight that it'll be worth practicing presence.
Yeah. And even I think there's some gospel themes in this. I think the gospel of Jesus Christ invites us in some ways to almost say being present to another person is enough.
Yeah.
The gospel is the forgiveness God offers in Jesus Christ and the deep assurance of new and everlasting life. Our identity, our value, our worth is secure in the things that God offers through his Son. And I think sometimes our busyness and rushing around and all the things that we get involved with distraction and are all ways that we're trying to justify ourselves. I think there's an invitation in the power of presence to say that we've been justified in Jesus Christ. And if we merely give someone else our full face for a moment, there's a beauty to that, and that is enough. We haven't
Yeah.
offered them any great words of wisdom. We haven't even done anything for them in that moment.
Yes.
But I think there's some gospel themes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as we're there are a few things that I guess from my perspective, because I battle this and I battle my driven nature, that I've learned that I need to incorporate in my life in order to create the possibility of presence. And outside of a few things, that riptide is too strong for me to overcome myself.
Yes.
And the two things that I would say is, number one, I need to create margin around time. So, whether it's this podcast or having coffee with someone or lunch or whatever the circumstance, if I can show up in some fashion just 5 minutes early, even if I'm sitting out in my car, and make sure that on the back end, I've got what I like to have at least a 15-minute cushion so that I'm not looking at the clock. That 5 minutes allows me to quiet so many things going on. And the quality of the time that I have with that person, I think, is magnified 2, 3x by simply having 5 minutes. And if we can magnify the power of something double, triple by just giving 5 minutes, that is, an incredible thing. So that's something that I would offer to people to try, that if we're rushing in from the outside, we're already way behind in the possibility of offering presence. And then the second thing is, do everything in your power to quiet distraction. Obviously, phone is a place to quiet distraction, and we should all do whatever we need to do to quiet that noise. But we may need to quiet other forms of distraction, of something that we need to close out before we enter into the conversation, or something that we need to intentionally put off until later, so that our minds aren't running on 2 or 3 tracks at the same time. And I find if I can simply give that margin and quiet distraction, then even with my driven nature, I have a chance of being present to someone.
That's wonderful, Tommy. I think those are wonderful practical suggestions. Anything else come to mind?
Part of listening, I guess I would say, we obviously want to hear, but I like to try to practice noticing and listening. And so when someone says something, I was on vacation and it didn't go as well, I'm trying to notice, is that person saying that in just a casual, matter-of-fact way, or is there a tone in it that is an invitation in it? So I'm trying to notice maybe the specific words that they're saying. I'm noticing maybe their facial expression or their posture in the midst of a conversation. I'm noticing whether their eyes go off to the side.
Sure.
Just noticing things is, to me, part of the practice of listening. And I find often it's in those slightly unexpected things that I notice that alerts me to something significant has happened.
Appreciate that. Appreciate
Well,
that.
you're a master at all of this. These are just things I pay attention to.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tommy. And I think your comments on margin are so important. to this. And I would even say maybe even just have the practice of offering a brief prayer um, before you go in that 5 minutes that
Yeah.
you've sort of budgeted, where you quiet bodily. You
Yes.
almost like take a deep breath, exhale, and maybe you offer a prayer
Oh, I love
because
that.
the
Yeah.
power of this is in the power of the threesome. It's the two people plus the presence of Christ through the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
certainly in your life, that you're bringing to that situation.
That's great. Yeah. I love that. Any other kind of, I guess, as we're closing down, that are practices or things that, stand out to you as you um, kind of champion this idea of the importance and the power of presence?
I don't know if I've used the word sacrifice. I think there's always a sacrifice. And I think of this sacrifice of love that the Lord Jesus made. It is always a sacrifice to be present to someone else because you're sort of sacrificing um, the things that you might want to push forward immediately. In order to
Yeah.
be fully present to another person. So there's a yielding and a sacrifice. And I guess that's just a thought. And maybe if I were to give sort of a final note, it's just to say, I think there's more in this than we realize.
Mm.
I think when we look at the sweep of Scripture and how much emphasis God put on being present with his people, and then some of my experiences have shown me that there's way more in this than we realize. And I'll maybe just mention two examples. I used to do spiritual direction with the director of Richmond Hill, Ben Campbell, the founding director. And one time, one of the spiritual direction sessions that stands out to me the most was Ben actually sat wordlessly with me for about 45 minutes. He just accompanied me. And I don't know how we got there, but we even walked around. And I remember going into the garden at Richmond Hill, and he sat next to me. And I think he knew that God was speaking to me about some things. And the thing he could offer was to accompany me. And so he sat next to me, being powerfully present with me, but without a word spoken. And I just remember God powerfully meeting me in
Were
that.
you speaking?
I wasn't speaking either. I was just praying and listening. I don't believe I was speaking. I just remember he had invited me to go to God with some things. And so he just sat with me as I undertook that.
Wow. That's amazing.
Maybe I
Yeah.
prayed out loud. I'm not sure, but I just
Yeah.
remember him being powerfully present. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
And I just think we don't know how God is even enabling us to be present to other people in critical moments. There's a lot of it that we don't even know. Jesus had sort of a ministry of walking around and being present to what the Spirit was doing and being present to people like the woman with the flow of blood who just touched him amidst the rush of the crowd. And somehow he had a way of being present to that moment. So I guess the thing I would want to leave with is there's way more to this, I think, theologically and spiritually than we scarcely understand.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks. I love the conversation. I think you're so right. There's so much more to it. And my hope, our prayer, is that we will all, certainly me included, take this to heart and both have open eyes and open hearts to the power of presence and begin to do the work to grow more in presence. And I believe that it's in that that God will meet us and that God will work through us in powerful ways. So
I appreciate that, Tommy.
thank you, Nelson. I love the conversation. Love you. And
likewise.
And look forward to taking advantage of your retirement years with golf, dinners, and lots of presents with one another.
That's it. Me too.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us in this episode of Space for Life. This is certainly an episode to share with your friends, and it's an episode to put into practice in your life. And so I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for being with us, and we'll be back.